their pals, Lila and Everett Olson. Now, it turns out Olson, member of the National Academy of Sciences and all that kind of stuff, a zoologist, paleontologist, fossil man. Well, besides that, Ole was quite interested in butterflies. And Ole came to me. Ole was an old pal of mine, and he was coming to this thing every Wednesday night. We've been doing this for 15 years, folks. That's why old Ben and Dottie weren't around on Wednesday nights to go to the poker parties or something. They were up there at UCLA talking evolution. So Ole says, hey, I know this guy. He's kind of lanky, and he's a medical man. You got to understand, see, we academics, medical man? What do they know? He says, no. He says, it's okay. It's okay. He says, the guy publishes. Okay. He's not really a medical man. He publishes. So okay, bring him along. And, that was maybe 10, 12 years ago. It was quite a while back. And so they started coming, and Dottie would get roped into this thing, and occasionally Lila would show up. And I was delighted because Ben was such a wise and decent and excruciatingly humorous guy. He used to call me Sire. I never knew exactly why that was, but anyway, we had wonderful good fun. And Ole was a really great man as well, and so it was a great deal of fun for me. I enjoyed seeing him every time. And I was wondering one time sort of why I was so lucky that here this guy's coming from Children's Hospital, he's coming, and he lives way out in Woodland Hills or someplace or other, and he comes every Wednesday night with 45, 50 other people, and we have dinner together, and it goes on for 3 hours. We talk science. And so I once asked him sort of about this, and he said, Bill, he says, you don't. I'm another Bill. I'm sorry, just plain Bill, It's probably infectious. I don't know. But I asked him, I said, how come, if this is really nice, but how, he says, Bill, he says, you don't really understand. He says, this is a way station. I said, it's a way station? He said, oh, yeah, we come here, and we have dinner, and we talk science, and then we go up to the Olsons and drink bourbon. And that's the real reason we come every Wednesday night. And as far as I can tell, this bourbon business, that was to make the butterflies more potable.
Thank you, Bill.
All right, kiddo.
Harvey, are you ready?
You might as well just forget it.
Yeah. Okay. Harvey's coming.
I'm Harvey Rosenberg. My memories of Ben go back some 50 years or more to our time together at the Boston Children's Hospital. Ben was chronologically just a few years older than me, but intellectually he was several generations ahead. We had a great shortage of space in the department at that time, and I, as a first-year, very lowly resident, was found a place in Ben's office. He took it very graciously, or as graciously as the circumstances would permit, but I soon learned that there was hardly anything I could say to Ben that he didn't already know. And so we had very few conversations, mostly small talk. In the subsequent 50 or so years, have remained as close as the geography of Texas and California would permit. I've always considered myself a fair weather friend, since we had very few opportunities to cross words. But Dottie and Ben and my late wife Marguerite and I had some escapades that would be worthy of Calvin Trellis, beginning from driving from Edinburgh to Oxford to London, and then from Barcelona to Paris to Budapest, and ending up in Belgrade. Ben was a very kind person, always very kind. And even in Belgrade, which at that time, they were used to saying kind things to each other. They didn't know any different. But we had been giving pretty much the same lectures repeatedly across the continent. Mine was rather arcane, not worthy of discussion. But Ben said the closest thing to something unkind to me. Harvey said, I've heard that talk now so many times, I think if I hear it one more time, I may understand what you're driving at.
Thank you.
I'm Jane Schaub from UCLA. My husband, Bill, just talked. I met Ben every Wednesday night. I'm a biologist, and one time I was about to give my talk. I sprouted the oldest seed in the world, a sacred lotus 1,300 years. And Ben came up to me and said a Tibetan chant. You know, lotus is associated with Buddhism. He said, Omni Padme Hum. Hail to the jewel in the lotus. So I say to Ben, Omni Padme Hum. Hail to Ben. Thank you.
That's beautiful. That's lovely, Jane. Gary is coming in.
I am Daria Haust, and I came with my husband Heinz from Canada to honor and commemorate and celebrate this day with Dottie and Ben's family and friends and Bill Shank as well. Yesterday, Harvey Rosenberg, and I'm a pediatric pathologist owing to Ben. Yesterday at dinner, Harvey Rosenberg, our colleague, asked me, were you the first fellow of Ben's? And I said, no, I think there was a Japanese fellow before I came to Cincinnati Children's Hospitals to be with you. This was 1959 to 1960. I came to Ben because I had the great fortune in meeting him at one of the International Academy of Pathology meetings when I was still a resident in training, and my mentor and boss made me go to the meeting in Washington in my second year of training to deliver a paper. And then he was so proud that somebody from his department from a very small university in Canada, this is Queen's University in Kingston, total number of students, 4,000 in those days, presented a paper at the international meeting that he gave in honor of that female resident, which was also a very unusual thing in Canada in those days. He gave a cocktail party and invited his friends. He belonged to the Plato Club, and Plato Club was a club, maybe some of you know, of very distinguished not yet 40 years of age. And Ben was not 48 of age. He was much younger, and so was my boss. He was 39, so he was accepted to this club. And at that party, I used to be very shy. Difficult to believe, but I used to be very shy. And Dr. Moore, my mentor, my boss, introduced Dr. Lanning to me. And then he was also very reserved, but I guess he had pity with me because I was alone. There were no other female members at this particular party. So he came and he spoke and he wanted to know about this or that, and he attended the paper, so he was trying to be very generous. And then in no time we were exchanging some thoughts in Latin, and I was very surprised because I was educated primarily on the continent in Europe, and we didn't find too many North Americans who were in real command of Latin, whereas we were after 9 years of Latin at school. But then it went from Latin to Russian, from Russian to German, from German to French. Before I knew, there was Tibetan, and before I know, I did not know what all the languages were. He was scribbling them down for me. And then he said, he would like me to come and spend my last years of training in his department in Cincinnati. And I was very astonished and very flattered. Here is the great man, he belongs to Platter Club, and I want to go to work with him. Well, after finishing my training at Queen's, I had the permission to go and spend 14 months with him in Cincinnati's Children's Hospital, which was a revelation for me that I probably never had before, nor thereafter experienced in my professional life, and also perhaps somewhat also in my private life, because in Ben one did not only found the genius of the thought and the insight, but a very proper, humble man of great integrity and modesty, very great modesty. And it came to the point where I tried to imitate some of the things, and of course we already heard about amnion nodosum, so I won't tell you about that one either. But he inspired one by unraveling some things that one did not know about oneself at all, just being quiet and stimulating by dropping a word or two here or there, or commenting on your work. In the short period of time I spent in Cincinnati, relatively, we accomplished 4 different projects and published 5 papers on original work. It was all Ben's idea, not mine, of course. But he put my name first. He always put the name of his co-workers, young people, first, because he cared. He cared very much. Not only that, but looking back, he had so much, he never had to fear that anybody is going to take away from him anything at all. And when I went back home, I developed pediatric pathology in our center. And then in 1962, I went for my very first overseas trip of the International Academy of Pathology, already on staff at the university. And there I met Dr. Arthur Herting. He was a very famous man in the area of gastroenterology and development, a very famous man. And he came while I was in Cincinnati to visit Dr. Landing and gave a lecture or 2, I think. And when I saw him at that particular meeting, he said to me, "Did you hear about Dr. Landing?" And I said, "Yes, he moved to Los Angeles, to Children's Hospital." And he said, "That's what troubles me. Anyone who goes there goes to a Sahara, intellectual Sahara. They're going to finish Dr. Landing. They finished some people before." And I said, "No, Dr. Letting, I don't think anybody will do this to Dr. Landing." And sure, I was true. He blossomed, and with him, not only the Department of Pathology, he contributed to many other departments, as we heard from his friends. And this place became a very famous place, owing in not too small a measure I admired in him. We would be in Cincinnati sitting there with the residents, and he would say, and somebody would say, oh, I don't know anything about that one or that one. And he would say, I think in the Journal of Pathology of such and such here, there is an article, I think it is on page such and such. It's not on page, it's on the left-hand side. And look up, and sure enough, there was the article. Now, I tried very hard to mimic that. I don't think I've ever succeeded. But before closing, I was thinking about the fact that we have really not lost Dr. Landing. Whoever had the privilege and great privilege and pleasure of meeting him and working with him will forever carry a piece of what he represented with oneself. I hope that we can give to the young generation what he gave to all of us. Thank you.
I'm Phil Varnas. I first met Ben at the Burbank Unitarian Fellowship. I remember him as being a very humble and down-to-earth man. And he was also very frugal, and I suspect that might have had the fact that he was a child from the Great Depression may have had something to do with that. During a personal crisis about 30 years ago, Ben and Sue invited me to stay at their house for a few days. During that time, I watched Ben prepare a soup made from all the leftovers, including stale bread from the refrigerator. And I think it tasted pretty good.
You're being kind. Oh, thank you.
Let's see. Do you remember being from Virginia?
Oh, okay. That's right.
Please. I want to say a couple of words. I'm Jim Fallon. I'm a professor at UC Irvine and had the great pleasure and honor of working with Ben over the past 5 years in this bill. And I usually can handle my own in an argument, at least I thought I could. Bill told me early on that if you're going to go in and farmers and heavy lifting, it's fodder, for the heavy lifting, or at least the coach. And I used to go up to his house and we were going through some of the manuscripts and working hard on it, and I really found out what it was like to spar and parry with a worthy opponent, if you know what I mean. And all of you know Ben knows intellectually what a honest and tough customer he was, but absolutely a joy to talk to. It got to the point I was going up to meet with Ben and with Bill and Junko to go over the paper so much, and being on the phone for so many hours, my wife thought I was having an affair. And the only affair I was having, of course, was also having the pleasure of hugging Dottie every time I saw her. When you went to speak with Dottie and Ben, you got both sides of your brain stimulated. 100% make one side glow, and the other would make the other side glow. But as our discussions would go on, Ben and I would sneak into the back because we both like bourbon and sneak in a cigarette. And these are great. This is a great bonding thing too. So we'd go up in the back talking about all sorts of things. But Bill would stay out of it, and he'd wait until I'd say the wrong thing, and he'd be there like, oh, You mentioned somebody's name, some scientist who was really narrow-minded, and all I'd have to do was say it, and he would of course, go on and on, but he was right. And he did a couple of things that I think were extraordinary. One time we were sitting in the back, and his chair was on the edge of the grass. And he's a little older than I am, but I found out he was, I saw the most nimble thing I've ever seen in my life. I mentioned somebody's name, a professor from UCSD, I won't say now, who he was particularly not fond of. And he threw up the cigarette, and he went back, and the chair went off the edge, and he rolled back. He did a backflip and came up, holding the cigarette and the drink. I couldn't believe it. Yes, this is the most... And his intellectual prowess, I think, went all through his body, even when he became a little infirm. It was quite amazing. And so a couple of these things would happen, and Bill would always be in the kitchen. He wouldn't go out with us because he knew trouble. And we talked about all sorts of things, and Bill had told me, he says, don't say anything unless you really want to defend it. That's exactly what you mean. We're talking about this one thing about, and I mentioned the word sinusoid, and he went, sinusoid, what are you talking about? Well, I tried, and I was saying, I'm from the 60s, you know. I said, well, it's kind of a loosey-goosey term, but I mean kind of oscillatory. And we went back and forth. Well, this led to 2 months of faxes going back and forth. We wrote one paragraph on it, and we got returned about 20 pages of the most detailed, careful arguments from Ben. I said, we shouldn't publish this, we should publish his comments. They're quite extraordinary. And in the end, and I'll just finish up, I had asked Ben, I said, why did you bring me into this collaboration? He said, well, we needed a neuroanatomist. I said, you are a neuroanatomist, neuropathologist, neuroanatomist. Well, that's what he said at the beginning, but toward the, after a couple of years had gone by and he knew it better, he said, Fallon, he says, really why we brought you in, he said, with the type of people we're dealing with and the type of battering we're going to take for some of this science, he said we needed a good Sicilian with an Italian name to be our counselor.
Well, thank you so much for all those stories, and I'm sure it's a wonderful tribute to Ben Landing to hear the evidence of a life like his that so obviously touched so many people so profoundly. Thank you for that gift of your memories. And I encourage folks who didn't feel moved to speak just now, if you felt that your story is too small to say in front of folks, or if you're shy about using a microphone, to come up to Dottie and the family as we're lingering over our drinks and snacks and tell them the stories directly. She should see it as a gift.